Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, if you so desire, please empower us to read the Srimad Bhagavatam here in the Dham with full concentration and love in our hearts. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. So we're continuing with the reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam here at the live Govardhan studio, live at Govardhan Studios at the Bhaktivedanta Ashram. We welcome anybody who's joined us online. Please tell your friends. We'll be here until the 18th of November. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, entitled Satī Quits Her Body. And Satī had asked her husband for permission to go to a soiree, a yajna performance. And he said it wasn't a good idea because she would be disrespected by her father. Because Daksha, her father, had a grudge against her husband, Shiva. And he said that it will cause you so much consternation that you might even want to leave your body. So he foretold what might happen. Nonetheless, because Satī hadn't been out for a while, 1,000 years or so, and she saw everybody else going there all dressed up, and she wanted to go. She felt cognitive dissonance because her husband said, don't go, and her mind said, I gotta go. So she finally left, and she hurried off. All the minions of Shiva followed behind her in their ragtag way, and she's arrived at her home, and as Shiva suspected or predicted, her father ignored her. Her mother and sisters, however, couldn't ignore her because Prabhupada says, in general, women have softer hearts. And they were crying to see her, crying tears. And that's what we're taking up. Text 8. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception. And although she was offered a seat and presents, she did not accept anything because her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Purport. Satī did not accept the greetings offered by her sisters and mother because she was not at all satisfied by her father's silence. Satī was the youngest child of Daksha, and she knew that she was his pet. But now, because of her association with Lord Shiva, Daksha forgot all his affection for his daughter, which very much aggrieved her. The material bodily conception is so polluted that even upon slight provocation, all our relationships of love and affection are nullified. Bodily relationships are so transparent that even though one is affectionate towards someone in a bodily relationship, a slight provocation terminates the intimacy. Pardon me? Where's that? Transient, sorry. Correct. 9. Present in the arena of sacrifice, Satī saw that there were no oblations for her husband, Lord Shiva. Next, she realized that not only did her father fail to invite Lord Shiva, but when he saw Lord Shiva's exalted wife, Daksha did not receive her either. Thus she became greatly angry, so much so that she looked at her father as if she was going to burn him with her eyes. Purport: by offering oblations in the fire while chanting the Vedic mantra Swaha, one offers respect to all the demigods, great sages and pitris, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Vishnu. It is customary that Shiva is one of those who are offered respects, but Satī, while personally present in the arena, saw that the Brahmanas did not utter the mantra offering oblations to Lord Shiva. Namah Shivaya Namah, Namah Shivaya Swaha. She was not sorry for herself, for she was ready to come to her father's house without being invited, but she wanted to see whether or not her husband was being respected. To see her relatives, her sisters and mother, was not so important. Even when she was received by her mother and sisters, she did not care, for she was most concerned that her husband was being insulted in sacrifice. When she marked the insult, she became greatly angry, and she looked at her father so angrily that Daksha appeared to burn in her vision. The followers of Lord Shiva, the ghost, were ready to injure or kill Daksha, but Satī stopped them by her order. She was very angry and sorrowful, and in that mood she began to condemn the process of sacrificial fruitive activities and persons who are very proud of such unnecessary and troublesome sacrifices. She especially condemned her father, speaking against him in the presence of all. Purport: the process of offering sacrifices is especially meant to satisfy Vishnu, who is called Yajnesha, because he is the enjoyer of the fruits of all sacrifice. Bhagavad Gita also confirms this fact. The Lord says, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, he is the actual beneficiary of all sacrifices. Not knowing this fact, less intelligent men offer sacrifices for some material benefit. To derive personal material benefit for sense gratification is the reason persons like Daksha and his followers perform sacrifices. Such sacrifices are condemned here as a labor of love without actual profit. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. One may prosecute the Vedic injunctions of offering sacrifices and other fruitive activities, but if by such activities one does not develop attraction for Vishnu, they are useless labors. One who has developed love for Vishnu must develop love and respect for Vishnu's devotees. Lord Shiva is considered the foremost personality amongst the Vaishnavas. Vaishnavanam yata shambhu. Thus when Satī saw that her father was performing great sacrifices but had no respect for the greatest devotee, Lord Shiva, she was very angry. This is fitting. When Vishnu or a Vaishnava is insulted, one should be angry. Lord Chaitanya, who always preached nonviolence, meekness, and humility, also became angry when Nityananda was offended by Jagai and Madai, and he wanted to kill them. When Vishnu or a Vaishnava is blasphemed or dishonored, one should be very angry. Narottam Das Thakur says, Krodha bhakta dveshi jane. We have anger, and that anger can be a great quality when directed against a person who is envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee. One should not be tolerant when a person is offensive toward Vishnu or Vaishnava. The anger of Satī toward her father was not objectionable, for although he was her father, still he was trying to insult the greatest Vaishnava. Thus Satī's anger against her father was quite applaudable. 11. The Blessed Goddess said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved of all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. No one but yourself could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Purport: in Bhagavad Gita 9:29, the Lord says, Samuham sarva bhuteshu, I am equal to all living entities. Similarly, Lord Shiva is a qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he has almost the same qualities as him. Therefore he is equal to everyone. No one is his enemy, and no one is his friend. But one who is envious by nature can become the enemy of Lord Shiva. Therefore Sati accused her father, "No one but you could be envious of Lord Shiva or could be his enemy." There were other sages and learned brahmanas present, but they were not envious of Lord Shiva, although they were all dependent on Daksha. Therefore no one but Daksha could be envious of Lord Shiva. That was the accusation of Sati. 12. Twice born Daksha, a man like you, can simply find fault in the qualities of others. Lord Shiva, however, not only does not find fault with others' qualities, but if someone has a little good quality, he magnifies it greatly. Unfortunately, you have found fault with such a great soul. Purport. King Daksha is addressed here by his daughter Sati as Dvija, twice born. Twice born refers to the higher classes of men, namely the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. In other words, Dvija is not an ordinary man, but one who has studied the Vedic literature from a spiritual master and can discriminate between good and bad. Therefore, it is supposed that he understands logic and philosophy. Sati, Daksha's daughter, put before him sound arguments. There are some highly qualified persons who only accept the good qualities of others. Just as a bee is always interested in the honey in the flower and does not consider the thorns and colors. Highly qualified persons who are uncommon accept only the good qualities of others, not considering their bad qualities. Whereas the common man can judge what are good qualities and what are bad qualities. Among the uncommonly good souls, there are still gradations, and the best good soul is one who accepts an insignificant asset of a person and magnifies that good quality. Lord Shiva is also called Ashutosh, which means one who is satisfied very easily and who offers to any person the highest level of benediction. For example, once a devotee of Lord Shiva wanted the benediction that whenever he touched someone on the head, that person's head would at once be separated from his trunk. Lord Shiva agreed, although the benediction asked was not very commendable because the devotee wanted to kill his enemy. Lord Shiva considered his good quality in worshipping and satisfying him, and he granted the benediction. Thus Lord Shiva accepted his bad qualities as magnificently good qualities. But Sati accused her father, "You are just the opposite. Although Lord Shiva has so many good qualities and has no bad qualities at all, you have accepted him as bad and found fault with him. Because of your accepting his good qualities to be bad, instead of your becoming the most exalted soul, you have become the most fallen." A man becomes the greatest soul by accepting the goodness of others' quality, but by unnecessarily considering others' good qualities to be bad, you have become the lowest of the fallen souls. There's a commentary, this goes according to the commentary of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, and he gives this analysis of the three who are good and the three who are bad. And he says that the good ones start with seeing the good and bad in people, but then very purposefully emphasizing the good instead of the bad, even though they're very much aware of both of them. The next level up is the one who only sees the good, even though there's good and bad. And then the highest level, he said, is even when there's no good qualities, he finds something. On the bad side, the person sees the good and bad, but he emphasizes the bad. The next level up is, although the person has good and bad, he only sees the bad. And the highest level is the person doesn't have any bad qualities, but somehow he finds one. And he says that he has names for each one of them, listing them according to their quality. And he said those who are completely pure, they have a way of seeing the good in everyone. So he gives examples for each one of them. And one of the examples he gives, if somebody finds a good quality, even though there isn't any, householders at home and someone knocks on the door, bursts in, and then with a gun robs the house. Or knife. It's probably a knife back then. And takes away much of his wealth and goods. And then the man says, well, he was very pious. He didn't kill us. And not only that, he must have been much in need of these goods. And we feel very fortunate that we were able to give him something that can be useful in his life. Also, one other point, and that is that a man becomes the greatest soul by accepting the goodness of others' qualities. There's a quotation from Voltaire that I think of often in relation to that, when he says that when you appreciate the good qualities of others, then they become your own. And on the opposite side, when you don't have an appreciation for people's qualities, you become envious of them. Then it blocks your ability to take their association and take on their good qualities. Closes the heart. And it reminds me also, gṛṇanti. Kuntī Devī in her prayers uses the word gṛṇanti, which means, in that context, for prayers, that just by appreciating the devotional service of others, then one can make advancement. So if you have great appreciation for others to practice a devotional service, even if yours is very basic, you make advancement by appreciating their excellent devotional service. Text number 13. It is not wonderful for persons who have accepted the transient material body as the self to engage always in deriding great souls. Such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good, because that is the way they fall down. They are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities, the doolies. The doolies are the foot dust personified. And even if the Vaishnava forgives, then the doolies get them. Everything depends on the strength of the recipient. For example, due to the scorching sunshine, many vegetables and flowers dry up, and many grow luxuriantly. Thus, it is the recipient that causes growth and dwindling. Similarly, Mahapurushapada Pumpsubi, the dust of the lotus feet of great personalities, offers all good to the recipient, but the same dust can also do harm. Those who are offenders at the lotus feet of a great personality dry up. Their godly qualities diminish. A great soul may forgive offenses, but Krishna does not excuse offenses to the dust of his feet, just as one can tolerate the scorching sunshine on his head, but cannot tolerate the scorching sunshine on his feet. An offender glides down more and more. Therefore, naturally he continues to commit offenses at the feet of the great soul. Offenses are generally committed by persons who falsely identify with the impermanent body. King Daksha was deeply engrossed in misconception because he identified the body with the soul. He offended the lotus feet of Lord Shiva because he thought that his body, being the father of the body of Satī, was superior to Lord Shiva's. Generally, less intelligent men misidentify in that way, and they act on the bodily concept of life. Thus, they are subject to commit more and more offenses at the lotus feet of great souls. One who has such a concept of life is considered to be in the class of animals like cows and asses. Satī, especially that cow we used to have here, what was her name? The cow that Maharaj donated to me. He tried to kill everybody. Satī continued, "My dear father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name, consisting of two syllables, Shi and Va, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but yourself envies him." Purport: since Lord Shiva is the greatest soul among the living entities within this material world, his name is Shiva. His name, Shiva, is very auspicious for persons who identify the body with the soul. If such persons take shelter of Lord Shiva, gradually they will understand that they are not the material body but are spiritual soul. Shiva means Mangala, or auspicious. Within the body, the soul is auspicious. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. This realization is auspicious. As long as one does not realize his identity as the soul, whatever he does is inauspicious. Shiva means auspicious, and devotees of Lord Shiva gradually come to the platform of spiritual identification. But that is not all. Auspicious life begins from the point of spiritual identification. But there are still more duties. One has to understand his relationship with the Supreme Soul. If one is actually a devotee of Lord Shiva, he comes to the platform of spiritual realization. But if he is not intelligent enough, then he stops at that point, only realizing that he is spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi. If he is intelligent enough, however, he should continue to act in the way of Lord Shiva, for Lord Shiva is always absorbed in the thought of Vasudeva, as was previously explained, Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam. Lord Shiva is always in meditation on the lotus feet of Vasudeva, Sri Krishna. Thus, the auspicious position of Lord Shiva is realized if one takes to the worship of Vishnu, because Lord Shiva says in the Shiva Purana that the topmost worship is worship of Lord Vishnu. Verse, Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param tasmat partanam devi para tadyanam samachara. Thus, the auspicious position of Lord Shiva is realized if one takes to the worship of Vishnu, because Lord Shiva says in the Shiva Purana that the topmost worship is worship of Lord Vishnu. Lord Shiva is worshipped because he is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu. One should not, however, make the mistake of considering Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu to be on the same level. Brahma Rudradi Daivatai Samatvenai Viksheta Sapatande Bhavedruvam. That is also an atheistic idea. What's an atheistic idea? And what's the verse? Samatvenaiva viksheta sapashande bhavedruvam. One should not, however, make the mistake of considering Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu to be on the same level. Brahma Rudradi Daivatai. That is also an atheistic idea. It is also enjoined in the Vaishnava Purana. In which Purana? That Vishnu or Narayan is the exalted Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradi Daivatai Samatvenaiva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavedruvam. Which, this is an important verse. It matches right here. Yastu Narayanam Devam. Your turn. Yastu Narayanam Devam. Repeat. Brahma Rudradi Daivatai Samatvenaiva Viksheta Sapashande Bhavedruvam. A person who considers demigods like Lord Brahma and Shiva to be on an equal level with Narayan is to be considered an offender and an atheist. What? Padma Purana 18. It's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 18, 116. Yastu Narayanam Devam. That is also an atheistic idea. It is also enjoined in the Vaishnava Purana that Vishnu or Narayan is the exalted Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one should be compared to him as equal, even Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, not to speak of other demigods. Text 15. You are envious of Lord Shiva, who is the friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For the common man, he fulfills all desires. And because of their engagement in thinking of his lotus feet, he also blesses higher personalities who are seeking after Brahmananda, transcendental bliss. Purport. Ordinarily, there are two classes of men. One class, who are grossly materialistic, want material prosperity, and their desires are fulfilled if they worship Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, being very quickly satisfied, satisfies the material desires of the common man very quickly. Therefore, it is seen that ordinary men are very much apt to worship him. Next, those who are disgusted and frustrated with the materialistic way of life worship Lord Shiva to attain salvation, which entails freedom from material identification. One who understands that he is not the material body but his spirit soul is liberated from ignorance. Lord Shiva also offers that facility. People generally practice religion for economic development to get some money, for by getting money they can satisfy their senses. But when they are frustrated, they want spiritual Brahmananda, or merging into the Supreme. These four principles of material life, religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, exist. And Lord Shiva is the friend of both the ordinary man and the man who is elevated in spiritual knowledge. So it was not good for Daksha to create enmity towards him. Even Vaishnavas, who are above both the ordinary and the elevated men in this world, also worship Lord Shiva as the greatest Vaishnava. Thus he is the friend of everyone, the common men, the elevated men, and the devotees of the Lord. So no one should disrespect or create enmity towards Lord Shiva. (16) Do you think that greater, more respectful personalities than you, such as Lord Brahma, do not know this inauspicious person who goes under the name of Lord Shiva? He associates with the demons in the crematorium. His locks of hair are scattered all over his body. He is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes from the crematorium. But in spite of all these inauspicious qualities, great personalities like Brahma honor him by accepting the flowers offered to his lotus feet and placing them with great respect on their heads. Purport. It is useless to condemn a great personality like Lord Shiva, and this is being stated by his wife, Satī, to establish the supremacy of her husband. First of all, she said, you call Lord Shiva inauspicious because he associates with demons in crematoriums, covers his body with the ashes of the dead, and garlands himself with the skulls of human beings. That's pretty extreme. You have shown so many defects, but you do not know that his position is always transcendental. Although he appears inauspicious, why do personalities like Brahma respect the dust of his lotus feet and place on their heads with great respect those very garlands which are condemned by you? Since Satī was a chaste woman and the wife of Lord Shiva, it was her duty to establish the elevated position of Lord Shiva, not only by sentiment but by facts. Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living entity. This is the conclusion of Vedic scripture. He is neither on the level of the Supreme Personality of Godhead nor on the level of the ordinary living entities. Brahma is in almost all cases an ordinary living entity. Sometimes, when there is no ordinary living entity available, the post of Brahma is occupied by an expansion of Lord Vishnu. But generally this post is occupied by a greatly pious living entity within the universe. Thus, constitutionally, Lord Shiva's position is higher than that of Lord Brahma's, although Lord Shiva appeared as the son of Brahma. Here it is mentioned that even personalities like Brahma accept the so-called inauspicious flowers and the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. Great sages like Marichi, Atri, Bhrigu, and the other 9 sages who are descendants of Brahma also respect Lord Shiva in such a way because they all know that Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living entity. In many Puranas, it is sometimes asserted that a demigod is elevated to such a high position that he is almost on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the conclusion that Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is confirmed in every scripture. Lord Shiva is described in the Brahma Samhita to be like curd or yogurt. Curd is not different from milk. Since milk is transformed into curd, in one sense, curd is also milk. Similarly, Lord Shiva is in one sense the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in another sense, he is not, just as curd is milk. Although we have to distinguish between the two. These descriptions are in the Vedic literature. Whenever we find that a demigod occupies a position apparently more elevated than that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is just to draw the devotee's attention to that particular demigod. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita that if anyone wants to worship a particular demigod, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is sitting in everyone's heart, gives him greater and greater attachment for that demigod so that he may be elevated to the demigod's abode. Yanti Deva Vrta Devan. Bhagavad Gita 9:25. By worshipping demigods, one can elevate himself to the abodes of the demigods. Similarly, by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can be elevated to the spiritual kingdom. This is stated in different places in Vedic literature. Here Lord Shiva is praised by Satī, partially due to her personal respect for Lord Shiva, since he is her husband, and partially due to his exalted position, which exceeds that of an ordinary living entity, which exceeds that of ordinary living entities, even Lord Brahma. The position of Lord Shiva is accepted by Lord Brahma, so Daksha, Sati's father, should also recognize him. That was the point of Sati's statement. She did not actually come to her father's house to participate in the function, although before coming she pleaded with her husband that she wanted to see her sisters and her mother. That was a plea only. For actually, at heart, she maintained the idea that she would convince her father, Daksha, that it was useless to continue being envious of Lord Shiva. That was her main purpose. When she was unable to convince her father, she gave up the body he had given her, as will be seen in the following verses. Reflections, comments, expressions, questions. Pardon? What's the what for that? Don't offend Vaishnavas. It's always good to be around people who won't offend Vaishnavas, because then it will remind us how to not offend Vaishnavas. It requires effort, because the default mode in the material world is to offer criticism freely. It's the way the tongue moves. Everyone thinks, let me criticize. And it's noticeable when there are those who have either opted out, they signed a little sheet. There's a sheet you can sign that says, I opt out. I choose not to criticize. And those who just have lost the propensity altogether. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chet pranati bisha bhajantamisham Shushushaya bhajana vignamananyamanya nindari shunya hridamipsita sangalabhya. Rupa Goswami gives the gradation of devotees. First of all, anyone who can say Hare Krishna, then you should in your mind think that person's a rare soul and offer respects. Then Dikshasti Chet Pranati Bish means that somebody who's accepted the holy name as their life and soul, and they're chanting it under initiation. And then the highest is, and for those people, we should go out of our way to offer obeisances. It should be demonstrative. Either this, or with your elbows on the ground, or like flat like a stick. Three choices, 3 options. And then finally he says, Nindadi shunya hridamipsita sangalabhya, that a person who's noticeably lost the propensity to criticize others, just not there in the heart anymore. Such a person, sangalabhya, we should desire their association as much as possible. Try to be around them, try to serve them. Prabhupada says, give them your stuff, whatever you got to do to be around them, because that's the best of association. Yes?
So I'm trying to understand Sati's psychology also, because when she's discussing with Lord Shiva about going in the first place, her whole argument is, well, I want to see my family, I want to see my relatives. And even though Lord Shiva says, no, they're going to dishonor me, she still goes anyway. But then it says that when she sees her relatives, she didn't even care in the first place to see her relatives, actually, that wasn't her main concern. But that her main concern was to see that her husband was being respected. So I'm not fully understanding what her mindset is.
Because we all have these levels. We're in a bidimensional universe, or a multidimensional universe, and we live a bidimensional existence because we have our social considerations or bodily considerations, and then there's our ultimate goal of life and what's in our heart. And as human beings, I think if we consider it, we can appreciate her psychology, because there is a way, according to our sabhava, or our nature, that we're naturally impelled to do certain kinds of activities. As mentioned in that section, she saw others going to the soiree with nice earrings and new dress, and I want to go. So that's superficial. But deep in her heart, she's a great soul, and she had the best interest of her husband in mind. So what the text is revealing is the bidimensional features that we all have. We can hold these two concepts at the same time. In other words, there's a sense of, I want to go, but we can also be thinking, that's not really why I'm going. That's not really what I want to do. We have some inner, more refined desire that we're trying to fulfill. Doesn't necessarily have to be refined, but in her case it was.
Hare Krishna. How does the Nindadi Shunya manifest in a teacher or guru or acharya who has to point out fault and criticize? Like one time, Prabhupada, this is an example where he said, I'm not Samadarshina, and he was blasting the people who were doing things wrong, who were offending, and he severely chastised, he severely criticized them. So somebody might say, well, he's not Nindadi Shunya because he's not free from the propensity to criticize others. So as soon as we're in a position of teaching or authority, then it's kind of part of the portfolio that one has to point out room for improvement or give critique. How do the two
what I'm going to say? I've quoted it a million times from the Evam Vrita Swapriya Namakirtya Jatana Ragojita Chita Uchara Satyato Roti Tiroti Gayatu and Madhavan Ritati Loka Bayaha, the verse that Srila Ishwar Puri imparted to his disciple Nimai Pandit when he initiated him, which says that when one takes a vow to chant Hare Krishna, and gradually his heart becomes melted. And in the purport, the commentators have included Madhvacharya's commentary, in which he says there's only 2 symptoms by which any devotee can be judged. One is steadiness, because you can't fake that. You either show up or you don't. And the other one is mukhi prasada, which means that whatever comes from that person's mouth is prasad. It's meant for the benefit of other people. And although one may offer some strong advice about doing something one way or another, one can ascertain by seeing what was it meant for. It was meant for the good of the other person. There's also a qualitative difference that I think we can experience viscerally. If we live around cows, for instance, one year when I stayed at the Goshala, I used to get up early in the morning and I just put a chair out there with all the cows and I just watch them. And every once in a while there would be a kerfuffle because one of them was eating a little too far over towards the other one. And then I just watch and one of them would just go bang, with the horns, like really hard. And but it's not like monkeys. Monkeys get agitated and then they can't let it go. It's like, then they start a gang and they want to kill each other. And they remember it probably for years. They're envious. But cows, one slams the other one and the other one just sort of moves a little bit and then goes, no problem. And the one who slammed them also doesn't, it's not like they got mad. They just were trying to eat. And all of a sudden, you just see them go back to their thing again. And there's, as Prabhupada says in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, there's an uncanny way in which, and one that we can't understand with human reason, how it is that by being around cows that we can derive all the most noble qualities of a human. And around people who are free from the propensity to criticize others, even though they may give some critique of someone and it maybe seems strong, it's almost like the cow. It's like bang, and then there's nothing behind it. There's anecdotes of that. For instance, in Giriraj Maharaj's new book, well, it's not his latest book, he just wrote another one, the one about Bombay, and he tells a story in there about how Prabhupada had been walking around the campus, and he walked up the stairs, and he walked into, what's his name's, Vanabhata's brother, his older brother? Jagat Purush, 20 points. So, boy, he score, because he's clean. Everything was neat and tidy. He probably just walked in his room and looked, and it was like, well, pretty good. Then he said, what's up the stairs? And everyone said, nothing, Prabhupada. And besides, it's dangerous to walk up there. And Prabhupada then, I'm going. And he walked up the stairs, and there were some books that had been kept improperly, Shastra. And some of them were wet, some of them were moldy, they were just in bad shape. And Prabhupada became furious. And after he chastised them and walked down the stairs, everyone was afraid to go to the evening darshan, because they thought, we're probably persona non grata, we might take a collection of our Brahmin's threads and burn them or something like that. But when they got there, there was nothing. It didn't carry over. He did the surgery and then he moved on. And it wasn't that, he was agitated about it. It was just an anecdote, but it's some way that it's not ordinary. Other people hold grudges, become angry with people forever. Something. Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Throughout the story, I could see it's a valuable lesson where it comes pretty much common in throughout the human life. What has happened with the Satī? It gives so many good reflections, good points, like how we can compare this to maybe some of the incidents that we are going maybe in the past. Yeah, I just want to share this point.
I think it's such a nice point. It seems like a simple point, but it's so true and important, I think, because the Bhagavatam shows us our life. It presents these simple scenarios where we think, oh, yeah, I can relate to that. And it covers the whole spectrum. You get these incidents where you go like, yeah, I think I've done that before. I've been there before. I've been in this. And as we mentioned last night, somebody mentioned Hanumat Prashek Swami, who's so expert at contemporizing these. And he'll say, yeah, that's temple president, this, that. And then there's also these scenarios that seem way off the beaten path in the Bhagavatam, like Sadumna, turning into a woman and then turning back, and it's like back forth, and you think, like, what's that all about? It's like, it's the material world. That's what happens. And now we see it's more relatable nowadays because so many people are talking about how they're transitioning from one thing to the other, from one sex to the other, or gender, or whatever I'm supposed to say. And then you have human slavery, and you think, well, how does that come into the Bhagavatam? Why is that in the Bhagavatam? Because everything that one can experience in the material world is represented in the Bhagavatam, and then it's resolved in Krishna consciousness. So we get this advantage by reading it, and going through all the scenarios, and then it so completely solves the problem by bringing it to the point of Krishna consciousness that once we finish the Bhagavatam, we don't have any more problems. Or at least we know how to solve them all, because it puts us on that transcendental position. Bhagavatam solves all the problems. It answers all the questions, and it solves all the problems. From the inside out, too. Vidunoti. Anything else? Anybody outside today? Yes, Prabhu. Tirodatta. Where is it? Tirodatta is right here. Hare Krishna.
I just wanted to comment that the Bhagavatam has so many great personalities, and our line is a personal one, and so we follow the paths that great souls have done in the past. So, for example, we read Bhagavatam not because we want to gain some knowledge, but we want to follow in the footsteps of Rupa Goswami, who told us to read the Bhagavatam, right? Or we eat prasadam for the same reason, do any other activities for the same reason. And so it's nice to see that the great souls are actually doing what they say. For example, Brahma, by his example, he shows that we shouldn't be ignoring Shiva. Actually, Brahma, he greets him. And so we always have a personality to hold on to and say, hey, look, well, this is an example of somebody who just created the universe. Well, I'm just following him. So the Bhagavatam's one
and
example.
It relates also, doesn't it, to this interpersonal communication. Later on, when Prithu Maharaj is performing the 100 horse sacrifice, and Indra keeps stealing the horse, Prithu finally comes to the point where he wants to kill him. And then the priest there said, you can't kill him, we'll kill him. We'll do a oblation and suck him into the fire. And then Brahma comes down and says, no, you can't do that, he's a devotee. You can't kill Indra. And he says something so commonsensical to Prithu Maharaj. He says, just let it go. Let him have the 100, you keep 99. What's the big deal? Don't get all upset about it. And you're like, yeah, why didn't I think of that? And that's so common, everyday common, like you're saying, Prabhu. These are common circumstances, right? And then it just gives us this wisdom that, okay, Brahma, the smartest person in the universe, came up with a simple solution. Just let it go. Let him have, you do 99, let him do 100. How's that sound? Like, yeah, fine. I didn't think of that. Mataji, please go ahead.
I was reflecting on text 13, where it was saying that everything depends on the strength of the recipient. And we hear often that when we do something good or something great, we give the credit to Krishna and the previous acharyas, but when we make some mistake, we understand that it's our own fault. So I was just reflecting on that, how it's interesting. It says everything depends on the recipient's strength.
Yes, it's an excellent point. Thanks for bringing that up. There's another way that Prabhupada says it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Adi Lila, chapter 4, text number 34. In the second to last paragraph, he says that every living being in all the species of life has a particular appreciating capacity. And when you get to the human life, there's potential for increasing that capacity, appreciating capacity. So it's a similar point, and that is there's a way in which by our spiritual strength we're able to absorb more, and when we're able to increase our appreciating capacity for Krishna, we're able to take more also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing. We're on text number 17, page number 128. Satī continued, if one hears an irresponsible person blaspheme the master and controller of religion, he should block his ears and go away if he is unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemer's tongue and kill the offender. And after that, he should give up his own life. Purport. The argument offered by Satī is that a person who vilifies a great personality is the lowest of all creatures. But by the same argument, Daksha could also defend himself by saying that since he was a Prajapati, the master of many living creatures, and one of the greatest officers of the great universal affairs, his position was so exalted that Satī should accept his good qualities instead of vilifying him. The answer to that argument is that Satī was not vilifying but defending. If possible, she should have cut out Daksha's tongue because he blasphemed Lord Shiva. In other words, since Lord Shiva is the protector of religion, a person who vilifies him should be killed at once. And after killing such a person, one should give up his life. That is the process. But because Daksha happened to be the father of Satī, she decided not to kill him, but to give up her own life in order to compensate for the great sin that she had committed by hearing blasphemy of Lord Shiva. The instruction set forth here in Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should not tolerate at any cost the activities of a person who vilifies or blasphemes an authority. If one is a Brahmana, he should not give up his body, because by doing so he would be responsible for killing a Brahmana. Therefore, a Brahmana should leave the place or block his ears so that he will not hear the blasphemy. If one happens to be a Kshatriya, he has the power to punish any man. Therefore, Kshatriya should at once cut out the tongue of the vilifier and kill him. But as far as the Vaishyas and Shudras are concerned, they should immediately give up their bodies. Satī decided to give up her body because she thought herself to be among the Shudras and Vaishyas. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Striyo Vaishyas tata Shudras. Women, laborers, and the mercantile class are on the same level. Thus, since it is recommended that Vaishyas and Shudras should immediately give up their bodies upon hearing blasphemy of an exalted person like Lord Shiva, she decided to give up her life. I was just thinking about the eclipse and the extremes people go to make sure they don't get contaminated by the light of the eclipse. How much more so we should be fortified against people blaspheming, because even if you hear it, then you're supposed to kill yourself. So better to keep the shutters ready when it starts happening. Run and take cover.
Hare Krishna. As preachers, sometimes we're in a situation where we're with devotees, sometimes senior devotees, and topics come up. How to deal with that? Just walking away is sometimes not possible, or taken very badly from the other side. So how do you navigate in such a situation?
Well, I was reading up on the topic of gossip, and in one of the articles that I read, it said a sure way to ruin a gossip session is to offer a good quality. In other words, bring up a good quality of the person. And you just lob it into the ring. There, it's like usually a little circle. It's like blah, 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 blah. And then you say, yeah, did you know he has a really nice son? He really raised him nicely. And it's like, just throw one in there and it sort of, it's a chemical reaction. Sort of wrecks the whole thing. I've noticed that, even incidental hearing of criticism of devotees, it diminishes my ability to appreciate the person because it lingers. So we could consider that it's an aggressive, it's an aggressive activity, talking about people behind their back or offering criticism, and we should be on guard. But anyway, you said when we can't get away, then just try to wreck the conversation. I've seen that work before. Okay, 18. Therefore I shall no longer bear this unworthy body, which has been received from you, who have blasphemed Lord Shiva. If someone has taken food which is poisonous, the best treatment is to vomit. Since Satī was the representation of the external potency of the Lord, it was in her power to vanquish many universes, including many dakshas. But in order to save her husband from the charge that he employed his wife Satī to kill Daksha, because he could not do so due to his inferior position, she decided to give up her body. And regarding that point you just made, I think it's really important. It came into my mind that I was reading on a conference that I'm on of ISKCON leaders, and there was somebody had written after the conference. He said that somebody during the conference, two people had made a snarky comment about somebody who was a devotee, and this person had then said, so why did you do that? She just brought it up, and rather than letting it go, and just somebody brought up a snarky comment. So then she said, what's the origin of it? Why did you bring up a snarky comment? And when somebody brings it to light and says, and asks the question, then it calls everybody to rise to a higher level, because they have to try to defend it after that. Either that or they have to be embarrassed and be more careful the next time. Because sometimes after the fact, you think, I should have said this or that. And I was just thinking it's important to bring it up after the fact. You can do it in a reasonable way and just ask, like, why did you do that? Could help. Text number 19. It is better to execute one's own occupational duty than to criticize others. Those who are elevated transcendentalists sometimes may not observe the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as the demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth. Purport. The behavior of the most elevated transcendentalist and that of the most fallen conditioned soul appear to be the same. The elevated transcendentalist can surpass all the regulations of the Vedas, just as the demigods traveling in space surpass all the jungles and rocks on the surface of the globe, although a common man who has no such ability to travel in space has to face all those impediments. The most dear Lord Shiva, although he appeared not to observe all the rules and regulations of the Vedas, is not affected by such disobedience. But a common man who wants to imitate Lord Shiva is mistaken. A common man must observe all the rules and regulations of the Vedas, which a person who is in the transcendental position does not need to observe. Daksha found fault with Lord Shiva for not observing all the strict rules and regulations of the Vedas, but Satī asserted that he had no need to observe such rules. It is said that for one who is powerful like the sun or the fire, there is no consideration of purity or impurity. The sunshine can sterilize an impure place, whereas if someone else were to pass such a place, he would be affected. One should not try to imitate Lord Shiva. Rather, one should strictly follow his prescribed occupational duties. One should never vilify a great personality like Lord Shiva. 20. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. Purport. The Vedic activities are so designed that the conditioned soul who has come to enjoy the material world may do so under direction, so that at the end he becomes detached from such material enjoyment and is eligible to enter into the transcendental position. There's brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas gradually train a person to come to the platform of transcendental life. The activities and dress of a grihastha or householder are different from those of a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. It is impossible for one person to adopt both orders. A sannyasi cannot act like a householder, nor can a householder act like a sannyasi. But above these two kinds of persons, one who engages in material activities and one who has renounced material activities, there is the person who is transcendental to both. Lord Shiva was in the transcendental position because, as stated before, he was always absorbed in thought of Lord Vasudeva within himself. Therefore, neither the activities of the grihastha nor those of the sannyasi in the renounced order can be applicable for him. He is in the Paramahamsa stage, the highest perfectional stage of life. The transcendental position of Lord Shiva is also explained in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verses 52 and 53. Which are Prajahati yada kaman sarvam partan monogatan. Is that the verse? Yatate mohakalilam santarasyan sambhavitasya. Here, give me. 52 and 53 are, when your intelligence is passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all is to be heard. And when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained divine consciousness. It's so important, I got to read the purport. Don't do it, Vaisesika. Purport. There are many good examples in the lives of great devotees of the Lord, of those who become indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, even though an experienced brahmana. Sri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of the devotees, say, Sandhya vandana bhadramastu bhavato bho snanatubhyam namo bodheva pitarascha tarpana vidao naham shama shamayatam yatra kvapi nishadya yadava kulotam sasya kamsadvisha smara smaram agam harami tad alam manye kim anyena me. O my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. O bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. Comprehend in all kinds of prayer 3 times a day, taking a bath early in the morning, offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in the revealed scriptures. And similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in rituals, etc., then he is uselessly wasting his time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Shabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas and the Upanishads. And then 53 says, Shruti vipratipannate yadastasyati nishchala samadavachala buddhis tada yogam avapsisi. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Purport? You want to hear the purport? Yes. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most eager for anything you've ever had in your life, how much do you want to hear the purport? 10. Oh, all right. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna-conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly planets, heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly in communion with Krishna. And thus, all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. So the first verse was, Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyati tarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. And the second is, Shruti vipratipannate yadastasyati nishchala samadavachala buddhis tada yogam avapsisi. Is everyone okay? Better than okay. Here we are. And don't worry, we're going to have a little break in a minute of Brahma. It is stated here that when one fully engages in transcendental service of the Lord by performing activities without fruit of results, one is elevated to the transcendental position. At that time, he has no obligation to follow the Vedic injunctions or the different rules and regulations of the Vedas. When one is above the directions of the Vedic ritualistic injunctions for attaining different allurements and is fully absorbed in transcendental thought, which means thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, that position is called Buddhi Yoga, or Samadhi, ecstasy. For a person who has attained this stage, neither the Vedic activities for realizing material enjoyment nor those for renunciation are applicable. My dear Father, the opulence which we possess is impossible either for you or for your flatterers to imagine, because persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as a sacrifice. We can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. This can be achieved only by great personalities or renounced, self-realized souls. Purport. Sati's father was under the impression that he was exalted in both prestige and opulence, and that he had offered his daughter to a person who was not only poor, but devoid of all culture. Her father might have been thinking that although she was a chaste woman, greatly adherent to her husband was in a deplorable condition. To counteract such thoughts, Satī said that the opulence possessed by her husband could not be understood by materialistic persons like Daksha and his followers, who were flatterers and were engaged in fruitive activities. Her husband's position was different. He possessed all opulences, but he did not like to exhibit them. Therefore, such opulences are called avyakta, or unmanifested. But if required simply by willing, Lord Shiva can show his wonderful opulences. And such an event is predicted here, for it would soon occur. The opulence which Lord Shiva possesses is enjoyable in renunciation and love of God, not in material exhibition of sense-gratificatory methods. Such opulences are possessed by personalities like the Kumaras, Narada, and Lord Shiva, not by others. In this verse, the performers of Vedic rituals are condemned. They have been described here as Dhumavartmabi, those who maintain themselves on the remnants of sacrificial foodstuff. There are two kinds of foodstuff offered in sacrifice. One kind is food offered in fruit of ritualistic sacrifices, and the other, the best, is food offered to Vishnu. Although in all cases Vishnu is the chief deity on the sacrificial altar, the performers of fruit of rituals aim to satisfy various demigods to achieve, in return, some material prosperity. Real sacrifice, however, is to satisfy Lord Vishnu, and the remnants of such sacrifices are beneficial for advancement in devotional service. The process of elevation by performing sacrifices other than those aimed at Vishnu is very slow, and therefore it has been condemned in this verse. Vishwanath Chakravarti has described the ritualistic performers to be like crows, because crows delight in eating the remnants of food which has been thrown into the dustbin. All the brahmanas who were present for the sacrifice were also condemned by Sati. Whether or not King Daksha and his flatterers could understand the position of Lord Shiva, that's a pretty heavy term, flatterers. What do you do for a living? I'm a flatterer. Whether or not King Daksha and his flatterers could understand the position of Lord Shiva, Sati wanted to impress upon her father that he should not think her husband to be without opulence. Sati, being the devoted wife of Lord Shiva, offers all kinds of material opulences to the worshippers of Lord Shiva. This fact is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto. Lord Shiva's worshippers sometimes appear to be more opulent than the worshippers of Lord Vishnu, because Durga, or Sati, being the superintendent in charge of material affairs, can offer all material opulences to the worshippers of Lord Shiva in order to glorify her husband, but the worshippers of Vishnu are meant for spiritual elevation, and therefore their material opulence is sometimes found to decrease. These points are very nicely discussed in the 10th canto. Una más? Sí. You are an offender at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva, and unfortunately, I have a body produced from yours. I am very much ashamed of our bodily relationship, and I condemn myself because my body is contaminated by relationship with a person who is an offender at the lotus feet of the greatest personality. Purport: Lord Shiva is the greatest of all devotees of Lord Vishnu. It is stated, Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu. Shambhu, Lord Shiva, is the greatest of all devotees of Lord Vishnu. In the previous verses, Sati has described that Lord Shiva is always in a transcendental position because he is situated in pure Vasudev. Vasudev is the state from which Krishna, Vasudeva, is born. So Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna. And Sati's behavior is exemplary because no one should tolerate blasphemy against Lord Vishnu or his devotee. Sati is aggrieved not for her personal association with Lord Shiva, but because her body is related with that of Daksha, who is an offender at Lord Shiva's lotus feet. She feels herself to be condemned because of the body given by her father, Daksha. Unamas? Because of our family relationship, when Lord Shiva addresses me as Dakshayani, I at once become morose, and my jolliness and my smile at once disappear. I feel very much sorry that my body, which is just a bag, has been produced by you, and I shall therefore give it up. Purport. The word Dakshayani means the daughter of King Daksha. Sometimes when there was relaxed conversation between husband and wife, Lord Shiva used to call Satī the daughter of King Daksha. And because this very word reminded her about her family relationship with Daksha, King Daksha, she at once became ashamed because Daksha is an incarnation of all offenses. Daksha is the embodiment of envy. For he unnecessarily blasphemed a great personality, Lord Shiva. Simply upon hearing the word Dakshayani, she felt afflicted because of reference to the context, because her body was the symbol of all offense, because her body was the symbol of all offensiveness with which Daksha was endowed. Since her body was constantly a source of unhappiness, she decided to give it up. I find it interesting, too, the contrast between Shiva as Paramahamsa, who's always absorbed in seeing Krishna, and then he has light talk with his wife. Because it's mentioned here, when there was relaxed conversation, hey, Dakshayani. And also there's, the pastime with Chitraketu, where they're just kind of hanging out, the sages, and he's like, hey, you guys are just hanging out. Like, what's going on? And so there's, Paramahamsa and also just hanging out. It's kind of interesting, right? Yeah. Unamas. We're almost there. Maitreya, the sage, told Vidura, O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Satī sat down on the ground and faced north, dressed in saffron garments. That's heavy. She sanctified herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the mystic yoga process. Purport. It is said that when a man desires to quit his body, he dresses in saffron garments. Therefore, it appears that Satī changed her dress, indicating that she was going to quit the body given to her by Daksha. Daksha was Satī's father, so instead of killing Daksha, she decided that it would be better to destroy the part of his body which was hers. Thus she decided to give up the body of Daksha by the yogic process. Satī was the wife of Lord Shiva, who is known as Yogeshvara, the best among the yogis, because he knows all the mystic processes of yoga. So it appeared that Satī also knew them. Either she learned yoga from her husband, or she was enlightened because she was the daughter of such a great king as Daksha. The perfection of yoga is that one can give up his body or release himself from the embodiment of material elements according to one's desire. Yogis who have attained perfection are not subject to death by natural laws. Such perfect yogis can leave the body whenever they desire. Generally, the yogis first of all become mature in controlling the air passing within the body, thus bringing the soul to the top of the brain. Then when the body bursts into flames, the yogi can go anywhere he likes. This yoga system recognizes the soul, and thus it is distinct from the so-called yoga process for controlling the cells of the body, which has been discovered in the modern age. The real yoga process accepts the transmigration of the soul from one planet to another, or one body to another, and it appears from this incident that Satī wanted to transfer her soul to another body or sphere. And this will be the last one before we take a break. First of all, she sat in the required sitting posture. Then she carried the life air upwards and placed it in the position of equilibrium near the navel. Then she raised her life air, mixed with intelligence, to the heart, and then gradually raised it towards the pulmonary passage, and from there to between her eyebrows. The yogic process is to control the air passing within the body in different places called Shat Chakra, the 6 circles of air circulation. The air is raised from the abdomen to the navel, from the navel to the heart to the throat, from the throat to between the eyebrows, and from between the eyebrows to the top of the cerebellum. That is the sum and substance of practicing yoga. Before practicing the real yoga system, one has to practice the sitting postures, because this helps in the breathing exercises, which control the airs going upwards and downwards. This is a great technique which one has to practice to attain the highest perfectional stage of yoga, but such practice is not meant for this age. No one in this age can attain the perfectional stage of such yoga, but people indulge in practicing sitting postures, which is more or less a gymnastic process. By such bodily gymnastics, one may develop good circulation and may therefore keep his body fit. But if one simply restricts oneself to that gymnastic process, one cannot attain the highest perfectional stage. The yoga process, as described in the Keshava Shruti, where? Prescribes how one can control his living force according to his desire and transmigrate from one body to another or from one place to another. In other words, yoga practice is not meant to keep the body fit, because any transcendental process of spiritual realization automatically helps one to keep the body fit, for it is the spirit soul that keeps the body always fresh. As soon as the spirit soul is out of the body, the material body immediately begins to decompose. Any spiritual process keeps the body fit without separate endeavor. But if one takes it that the ultimate aim of yoga is to maintain the body, then he is mistaken. The real perfection of yoga is elevation of the soul to a higher position, or the liberation of the soul from material entanglement. Some yogis try to elevate the soul to higher planetary systems where the standard of life is different from that of this planet, and where the material comforts, lifespan, and other facilities for self-realization are greater. And some yogis endeavor to elevate the soul to the spiritual world, the spiritual Vaikuntha planets. The Bhakti Yoga process directly elevates the soul to the spiritual planets, where life is eternally blissful and full of knowledge. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga is considered to be the greatest of all yoga systems. And that brings us to Gayatri break. We'll be back here at 10 minutes after 12. See you soon. And thanks everyone at home for joining us from the live Bhaktivedanta Ashram at Govardhan Hill. Hare Krishna.